Ollie, good evening and thanks so much for your time. So you've heard of the case here in South Africa, the patient having travelled to Italy, and it seems that when it comes to Europe, Italy is the hotspot at the moment.
Very much so, and several of the cases that we have here in the UK had previously been in Italy and caught coronavirus while they were there. Italy has well over 3,000 cases now. Over 100 people have been confirmed to have died as a result of COVID-19 in that country. It really is the epicentre of the European outbreak, if you would, and as I say, a lot of the other European countries which are racking up cases now, several of them have also seen people bringing coronavirus back from Italy. That is leading to very significant emergency measures now in Italy as that government there tries to get on top of the outbreak. Schools are being closed until the middle of March. Football is being played, for example, behind closed doors. The government really trying to get on top of the outbreak, but at the same time admitting that it's going to be very difficult indeed. The Prime Minister earlier saying that the health service in Italy could end up being overwhelmed.
Well, Ollie, any idea what has, sort of why Italy is the hotspot there? I mean, previously we know Wuhan in China is the epicenter, or has been thought of as the epicenter of this virus. What's the connection?
Well, it does appear that some of the early cases of coronavirus had gathered in places in Italy where there were lots of other people. It also is suspected that coronavirus, COVID-19, may well have been circulating in Italy for quite some time before it was even picked up. And that means that a lot of the cases of British people, French people, German people and so on who were in Italy and brought coronavirus back to their home countries may well have picked it up before we even really knew that Italy was becoming an epicentre of the outbreak. I mean, here in the UK, for example, we've just heard in the last half hour that the number of confirmed cases has now hit 115. That is up from 87 the day before. So we're still talking about a relatively small number of cases. But at the same time, the speed with which these numbers are picking up in the UK and what we're seeing in Italy and other European countries as well is really leading to growing fears that this is an outbreak, as I say, which is gaining pace and getting to the point where it's beyond something that you can contain and something that you have to deal with and try and delay in terms of the spread.
Which are the other countries then, Ollie, where we are seeing a high number or a significant rise in cases, also where there's been a significant number of deaths from coronavirus in Europe?
We're also seeing France has been pretty badly hit. We've heard of new deaths in that country as well today. Switzerland has started to see a pickup in cases too. One of the difficulties when it comes to continental Europe is, of course, you have those countries which are next to each other and which don't have any really borders in place because of their membership of the European Union and the freedom of movement of people that comes with that. That makes it slightly easier, for example, for the UK to try and deal with this issue, because it's an island nation. That is therefore leading to much more coordination between EU countries to try and work together on this, not just to share best practice, to share advice, but to try and coordinate some kind of response. The European Union is saying to EU member states that there will be some understanding if border restrictions are desired for some EU nations when normally no border can be in place between EU countries. We've also seen meetings in Brussels this week. We will see another one on Friday. There's talk of a fiscal response that might be coordinated coming via the European Central Bank. So it's something that Europe is very aware of as being a particularly difficult issue, especially with regards to the European Union and its member states.
All right, well, we see that the UK has published an action plan, Ollie. Give us some idea of what's in that action plan. I suppose we could get all the help, take all the help we can get and advice at the moment as well.
Right, and the government published this action plan earlier in the week and set out various phases of its plan. We are moving today from the first phase of the plan, which is contain, where you have so few cases, you just try and stop coronavirus spreading beyond those very few cases. We are moving into the next phase because of what appears to be some in-community transmission here in the UK. That means that people are spreading the virus within the United Kingdom in communities and not just bringing it back from abroad where they've picked it up. Now, the delay phase means that all sorts of contingency measures might be able to be used. Things like school closures, things like policing changes in terms of police only following up on very serious crimes. We may see the NHS delaying some procedures and operations to deal with a growing coronavirus outbreak. We see the armed forces on standby to help with the police if they are required. We may see restrictions on public gatherings, restrictions or at least advice to avoid public transport. Now, none of those things may end up actually being enforced, but that is the toolbox, if you like, that the government is saying is available to it as this coronavirus outbreak starts to spread here.
All right, and just a couple of minutes ago, Ollie, we ran a piece on the impact of travel on the continent now, what this is costing airlines. Within Europe, what are we seeing happening with travel? What are we seeing the economic impact there at the moment as well?
I mean, a very stark reminder of the impact that we are seeing already and may see is that Europe's biggest regional airline, Flybe, collapsed overnight here in the UK. It's basically a domestic UK airline. It has been in financial difficulties for a number of months now, but the airline says that the slump in demand that it's seen in recent days because of the coronavirus outbreak meant that it simply couldn't stay afloat any longer. So, you know, that's one very recent and very real example of a couple of thousand people potentially losing their jobs as a result of this outbreak, partly because people just don't want to travel as much as usually would have been the case. It's obviously going to be affecting the major European airlines as well, from British Airways as part of the IAG group and others too. A real concern generally about the tourism sector in Europe. France is the most visited country in the world, Britain not far behind it, and we're heading into that spring-summer season when those two countries and other European countries as well, the south of France, we're thinking of the Spanish resorts and so on, are beginning to wonder how long this outbreak goes on and how much of an impact it's going to have. It is clearly already having an impact economically.
Well, thanks very much, Ollie Barrett, that perspective there on Europe and how it's dealing with the coronavirus.